You know when your truck has like birthing hips and a short little bed? Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Taylor and today I want to tell you the best nonfiction books that I have read in 2025. So I have read a ton in the year of 2025 and a lot of that includes nonfiction. Not all nonfiction impacts me in the same way, obviously. But today I want to tell you about the best books that I have read. I have a few that I don't own physically, so we'll talk about those ones at the end, but most of these I do own a physical copy of and I am really excited to share these with you today. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I am posting a video every single day in the month of December. And let me know in the comments below what your favorite nonfiction book of the year has been. So the first book I have is Communion, The Female Search for Love by Bell Hooks. And this talks specifically about women in their relation to love. When it says the female search for love, I do find that to be a little bit misleading because it's not entirely just about relationships, because I feel like the female search for love, it gives the connotation that it is just about romantic love, and that is not the case at all. This book talks about love in all of its facets. So friendship, family, romantic, of course, and also self-love, which I feel like, obviously there's self-help books that are all about self-love and transformation, but I like that these are essays that are just exploring things more. This is not a self-help book, but this will definitely help widen your mind in different ways. I think that it is really, really interesting. I will give the caveat, this book is definitely a product of its time, because there is a whole chapter about like choosing to be with women as if being gay is a choice and it is not. So I mean, I didn't find it so deeply offensive as a bisexual woman, but I know that other people might find it a little bit offensive. Just wanting to let you know that is in there. But I loved this book, and I read it during a time where I was so deeply lonely. I think it was January that I read this. It was so important to me and so revolutionary to me at the time. So I think, you know, if you're at a place where you're like, I don't know what to do and I'm feeling really lonely, I do think, like, take a look at Bell Hooks. She's real good for the soul. Next book I have is A Short History of Drunkenness: How, Why, Where, and When Humankind Has Gotten Merry from the Stone Age to the Present by Mark Forsyth. So this is the only kind of like fun nonfiction that I have on here, because I read a lot of pretty heavy nonfiction, but this one was so fun. It was exactly what I needed it to be when I read it. This is a short little guy, just over 200 pages, really not that long. Chapters are short, and each chapter focuses specifically on different societies and the way that they got drunk, because it's not about the kind of alcohol that they drank, it's about what they did while drunk. So apparently the ancient Egyptians were just like shit-faced all the time, and like puking from drunkenness was seen as like a good thing, I guess, whereas like the Romans were like, no drinking, that's bad, how dare you. Well, I just thought this was so fun. Also, we'll give you some really fun party facts, so highly recommend this one. Next is A True History of the United States: Indigenous Genocide, Racialized Slavery, Hypercapitalism, Militarist Imperialism, and Other Overlooked Aspects of American Exceptionalism by Daniel A. Sigerson. Whew. A mouthful, that's for sure. So this book gives a more comprehensive account of United States history. Daniel A. Sigerson was in the United States Army, and he actually worked as a history instructor at the United States Military Academy at West Point. And I loved this book so much. I feel like it really gives a good history of the United States, warts and all, which he does use in the book. He's like, I don't want to play into this American exceptionalism. We are a country that has made mistakes. We are a country with flaws. We can be proud of our country, but we need to make sure we know what we're talking about. And I think that's where this book really shines. It also does a really good job of explaining that these people were not just 2D caricatures of what history makes them a lot of times. They were people who were real, who had their own agendas, who knew what they were doing. So it's kind of like when people are like, oh, well, you don't understand like racism and slavery, like that was just the times. No, these people knew that it was bad. These people knew what they were doing, and to act as if they weren't would be to like almost infantilize them. The whole point of slavery was to exert control over an entire group of people. They knew that. That's why we have racism today. They had to create racism so that the slave trade could essentially happen. But this was super, super good. I don't agree with everything that he says. Like, he talks a lot about Andrew Jackson in a way that I could tell he kind of like admires the man, and I don't like Andrew Jackson very much. Based on what he said, I was like, he doesn't seem like a very good person. I guess, you know, we all have our opinions, but this was super good. Next is this teeny tiny little guy. This is On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. This, if you read anything about politics, or if you want to get into politics reading, I think this little guy is super, super nice. I actually listened to the audiobook. It's only 2 hours long, and literally the number one lesson in here is do not obey in advance. And that, I think, is, I mean, obviously all of this is really important. Do not obey in advance is something that we talk about a lot. Don't mindlessly give yourself up to an institution or like way of thinking without really knowing what you're doing. So on the back is a quote from it. It says, "The founding fathers tried to protect us from the threat they knew, the tyranny that overcame ancient democracy. Today, our political order faces new threats, not unlike the totalitarianism of the 20th century. We are no wiser than the Europeans who saw democracy yield to fascism, Nazism, or communism. Our one advantage is that we might learn from their experience." Next is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. This is a large print version, which is why it is so big. But honestly, I can't wait to reread this. I'm going to reread this in the new year for sure. I got this secondhand earlier this year. I am so glad that I did. The whole thesis of this book is that poverty is a government failing, not a moral failing. And Matthew Desmond strives to tell you why in this way. So essentially what brought upon the rise of the middle class was actually the New Deal by Roosevelt, and it was a way to let people live with having one job. You work your 40 hours a week, you're able to live off of one income, you can have basically everything you want. But then as we kept going through, you know, the 20th century, so 60s, 70s, 80s, we had these Republican presidents trying to tear it down a la Nixon and Reagan, essentially. And it's basically how we are conditioned as an American society to be taught that, like, oh, well, you're homeless, it must be your fault somehow, even though poverty is systemic. It is very hard to climb up socioeconomic brackets. One of my favorite things that I actually learned from this book was Bill Clinton made this thing called the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Funds, which were essentially just allotments of money given to each state, and they got to choose what they did with that allotment of dollars. So there are some places that chose to give money dollars to welfare recipients, but then there are places like Oklahoma who invested in marriage classes. And marriage classes, by and large, never convince people to get married. What they do is nothing. They waste government dollars. It's so crazy to me that the government wants us all to get married and have children, but then won't give us the economic stability to do so. And this book talks about that. But it is so crazy. But then there are places like Tennessee that it talks about in this book where they just keep the money. The government just keeps the money, and then they can keep it year over year over year, and they just have this big vat of money. What are you doing with that? Read this book. I mean, I'm talking about some of, like, my favorite books. I think if I were to pick one favorite, I talk about this book all the time. I talk about this book to everyone I meet, and I think about this book at least once a day. Next is The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. This book was so good at showing me more about the way our prison systems work and the way that it disproportionately affects particularly Black men, and that's what this book is about. There were definitely things that I realized I had been taught and never really thought about that much. Like, I knew that there were people in jail for nonviolent and drug offenses and that there's no reason for people to be in that situation, right? But then to add on to it, in this book I learned about the disproportionate sentencing for crack versus powder cocaine. They are the same. Crack cocaine has a disproportionately larger sentence because predominantly Black people and people of color are like use it. There's also like police stop and frisk campaigns where they will stop anybody and everybody and just go through their cars or, you know, search their persons, and you don't feel like you can say no to the cops. They're just coming up to you and being like, hey, you know, let me search you. And that's not okay. So it talks about like mass incarceration, legal systems, police systems, things, and the way in which the government gets to benefit off of these people being in jail. So this one was also, I mean, like I said, all these books are really, really important, but this one also was very, very good. Next was The Humanity Archive, Recovering the Soul of Black History from a Whitewashed American Myth by Jermaine Fowler. I did just recently finish this book, but it was so good. It starts from like before the slave trade all the way through kind of the present. He doesn't go through all of American history because that's not what this book is. It talks about like why American history has been whitewashed and in some of the ways that they have done it, how education is super important to Black communities, and he talks about Malcolm X a lot. He also talks about Africa and where people were coming from. One thing that has recently kind of come about that is really driving me nuts is that people think that it's some sort of gotcha to be like, oh, well, didn't you know, like, the slaves were actually bought and sold by other Black people. Like, Black people sold the slaves to the white people, therefore it was their own fault. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, why do you think that's some sort of gotcha moment? Because that's, either way, that's evil. You know what I mean? Like, buying, selling, owning human beings is evil. And either way, those people, the slaves, didn't know what was going on with them. They just were, without their consent, sold off. And then there's also this thing within American history, like I can say as someone who was taught American history in the American school system, like we're kind of taught that the slaves, you know, they didn't know the language, they didn't have language, they didn't have religion, all this stuff, when there were plenty of slaves who were Christian, who were Muslim, who had these belief systems, and everything was just taken from them. And it really drives me crazy as someone who like lives in this country that we are taught these things as a way to like infantilize people of color and Black people in particular. It's disgusting to me, and I'm glad that as an adult I'm learning these things, but it makes me sad that children in schools aren't learning these things and aren't learning accurate history. Next is How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them by Jason Stanley. This would be a really good companion to On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. This is a very easy introductory level of just fascist government. It pulls examples from India and Italy and obviously Nazi Germany, but then it also talks a little bit about the fascist policies that the Trump administration has been going through. But this book did also come out in 2018, so all we had was those first 2 years of the 2016 admin. I'm going to read you my favorite quote. When voters in a democratic society yearn for a CEO as president, they are responding to their own implicit fascist impulses. I'm going to leave you with that, but this book is very, very good. Next is A People's History of the United States from 1492 to Present by Howard Zinn. When it says to present, we kind of just get into, I think, the early 2000s, so we're a bit, like, past what present is on here, but that's okay. This book was really good in showing how many protests, a lot of the labor workers, the slave rebellions, we really get a lot of what regular people were doing, not just the rich white people. So I do think that for this book in particular, you kind of need a working history of the United States, and like you're taught United States history throughout your K through 12 education, I think that this would be a really good companion to something like that. I loved this book so much. I thought it was a little bit dry. I will say, like, in terms of entertainment value, this one was a little bit hard to get through, but that doesn't negate, like, the benefits that I've gotten from reading this book. And then the last physical book I have is White Rural Rage: The Threat to American Democracy by Tom Schaller and Paul Waldman. This book essentially explores why most of rural America is Republican or super, super conservative, why they feel so drawn to Trump when it seems to go against everything that rural America stands for. So it talks about, like, the performative masculinity. It talks about the radio shows and the scare tactics and Fox News and all of the things that are used to essentially hate on cities and to make people afraid, make rural people afraid of those that are not like them. One of my favorite things I actually learned from this book is that because we are around almost 3 generations away from the family farm now, truck manufacturers have actually made the beds of their trucks smaller so that they can make the cabs bigger. So some people are now using trucks as sort of like family vehicles in place of vans or whatever. So now instead of a 9-foot bed that can hold a 2x4, we have 5-foot beds that can't. And then you have the huge, like, you know when your truck has like birthing hips and a short little bed? That's crazy. But this book was super, super good. And then I have a couple books on my list that I don't have physically. So the next is Waste by Catherine Coleman Flowers. This is about, like, America's dirty secret, which is that there are so many places in America that do not have clean drinking water or proper sanitation facilities, and it is disproportionately Black communities that have this, and communities in the South where it's like really swampy, it's really hard to have a septic tank. So it's like part that activism and this problem, and then part memoir of Catherine Coleman Flowers and her experience with activism. So that one was really, really cool. Then I had The Bible Says So by Daniel McClellan. This one was so good. It talks about, like, did God have a wife? Is God actually male? What does the Bible say about abortion? What does the Bible say about divorce? What does the Bible say about a woman having to marry her assaulter? And Daniel McClellan is a Mormon man. He's a Bible theologist and a Mormon man, but he is, a historian first and foremost, and I think he did a really good job of staying true to his source material and, not letting his own religious biases take over. I thought this book was really, really good, and it's really funny to me the way that people who say that they believe in the Bible would probably not agree with a lot of things that were said in this book. And then the last book I want to talk to you about is 107 Days by Kamala Harris. This chronicles her 107-day campaign for the United States presidency. I really liked this book. I think Kamala Harris has a very good voice in this book. If you are into audiobooks, she reads the audiobook, which I thought was really cool. I think she was able to give her own little bit of, like, flair and spunk to it. It helped me understand her policies more and what she really wanted to do with the presidency. Honestly, it made me like her even more. She seems like just a very likable person. And I know that's what those books are, like, meant to do, but she just, I don't know. I just thought she was real cool. If you liked her, voted for her, whatever, I think that this book would give you even more insight into her, because one big downside of her campaign being so short is there were a lot of people who felt like, well, I don't know her. Why would I vote for her? I feel like I can't connect with her. And right, that is a downside of only having a 107-day campaign. But if she were to run for president again, this book would give you a lot of good insight into her thoughts. That is all of my favorite nonfiction for the year of 2025. I'm super excited to continue my nonfiction reading journey. This is the first year that I've actually read nonfiction for the whole year, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I want to continue learning through reading. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite nonfiction book of 2025 was, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.